Hello, welcome to Who Said That? Characterization Through Dialogue. I'm Michelle Pennington, and I'm super excited to present this class to you today. As an author, one of my favorite things to write is dialogue because it brings my characters to life. But I know it can be really intimidating. The good news is there is no limit to how rough a rough draft can be. In real life, when we have conversations with people, we want to say the right thing the first time, and it's really hard to do. Later, we often go home and think, I wish I would have said this. Well, that's what we get to do in editing. We get to go back and we get to fix the thing that we said before that was not quite as witty or funny or intelligent or threatening as we wanted it to be. You need to begin any dialogue by understanding your characters. You can't write what they would say if you don't know them really well. A lot of people enjoy doing character dictionaries, inspiration boards, character interviews. There are a lot of different methods for getting to know your characters. Experiment, find out what works for you, but you really do need to know them as well as you possibly can before you start putting words in their mouth. Do yourself a favor and make all of your characters different. If they're carbon copies of each other, it's really hard to create different personalities and to be able to show the different angles of their perspective and experience in the story. Make a diverse cast and do the unexpected. You can have the dark and brooding biker dude, the bubbly and talkative elderly neighbor lady, the scholarly and precise college professor, the cocky and controlling elementary PE coach, hot-headed and rebellious high school football star, the nerdy and awkward gynecologist, the capable and easy clerk in a department store. So you might be looking at this and thinking that this is definitely a diverse cast, but what I want to do is to ask you to stretch yourself just a little bit further. One of the things that we can do is to kind of mix things up a little bit. So instead of having a dark and brooding biker dude, what if we had a dark and brooding elementary PE coach? What if we had a bubbly and talkative gynecologist? What if we had a scholarly and precise biker dude? Things can just get really funny as you start looking at this. See how these characters come alive if you change things up a little bit and make a cocky and controlling clerk in a department store or a hot-headed and rebellious elderly neighbor lady. And what if our high school football star was awkward and nerdy or a capable and easygoing college professor? All of a sudden, these characters that were expected and a little bit cliche take on a lot of life. And as you can see, it's already easy to start thinking of dialogue for these characters. So how does personality affect speech? In the book Writing Vivid Dialogue by Rain Hall, she says, think of each character's key personality traits. Define them in adjectives. For example, honest, sensitive, ambitious, greedy, pessimistic, resentful. Whenever the character speaks, their words reflect one of those traits, either in content or in style. Let the character's personality shine through in everything they say. And then she gives us this really excellent exercise for practicing how to write dialogue according to a character's personality traits. So, write 5 personality traits down for a character, and then write a line of dialogue. I would recommend making it a fairly simple line of dialogue, just so that you can have the ability to do this with many characters in a short amount of time. But then change that one line of dialogue to reflect the personality traits you chose for that character. Now consider how somebody who was sensitive might tell someone to shut the door versus somebody who was resentful. As you can see, these minor changes will change the way the character would phrase any given line of dialogue. It's a really great practice to really get deep into understanding how personality affects your characters. This is an example of dialogue that I love from The Emperor's Edge by Lindsay Buroker. I'm going to read it to you. What were you doing? She asked. Waiting for nightfall so I could retrieve you. Really? Like a rescue operation? Touched, she smiled at him. Is it possible that the stodgy, emotionless assassin has perhaps grown to care about me? You are needed to implement the final phase of the plan. Her smile deepened. Don't worry, you don't have to say it. What? You like me. Since it's your plan we're following, it is logical to make a priority of your safety until Forge is thwarted. Easy, said Carius. If you're not careful with all these affirmations of affection, I might assume you want to be friends. I love Lindsay Broker. If you have a chance to read her series, The Emperor's Edge, it is a masterclass in characterization through dialogue. In this series, you see the change in House Sicarius, who is definitely an emotionalist assassin, becomes something deeper and warmer as he grows as a character, but he always retains a certain stilted and logical um, type of dialogue. No, Diana, I am not killed, but I think I'm rendered unconscious. Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. This one line really depicts her fanciful nature and her ability to exaggerate and to really um, over experience the moment. She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. I am in no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. In this we definitely see Mr. Darcy's pride and prejudice coming out. It tells us so much about his character and where he is at the beginning of the story. This line is so the quintessential Mr. Darcy that we have difficulty um, associating him with any other kind of personality trait. That's how good Jane Austen was at writing his dialogue. How does language affect speech? These are some things that you need to consider when you're writing dialogue. What was the character's first language other than English? This is assuming that you're writing your book in English. What geographical area do they come from? Would they have an accent or a dialect? You need to be careful with these. You don't want to overdo them in any way. Just use them as light seasoning to give it a little bit of flavor. Do they use slang or colloquialisms? Do they have a speech impediment or disability that affects their speech? Excuse me. Here are some more examples from literature. Every morning until you dead in the ground, you gonna have to make this decision. You gonna have to ask yourself, am I gonna believe what them fools say about me today? I can hardly carry off that accent. I think it's better written than spoken aloud in my voice anyway. But this is from The Help by Catherine Stockett. But certainly I believe you. Well, save for Basil, you're the only person who does. Yes, said Eustace, but me, I do not like Basil. In this quote, this is from The Talisman Ring by Georgette Heyer. She is saying these words as a English as a second language speaker. She is originally from France. And so if you see the but me, I do not like Basil, you see how even though the writer did not use any kind of um, gimmicks to create the French accent, you can see it in her arrangement of words, how she puts a phrase together. You are a lad, but when you come to a man's inches, you will find you have an empty pocket. This is from The Black Arrow by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a very old book, and it is written very much in, the language of that day. And it was more acceptable, I think, to readers of the time that would have read this, who were, contemporaries of Stevenson's time. It would have been more approachable to them. I like reading this book myself. It's one of my very personal favorites. But I just wanted to use it as an example to show that if I was to write the same story today, I would approach it a little differently and show only hints of this deep accent that this character had. Now, what's interesting about language is that in fantasy, science fiction, a lot of different um, authors will create their own slang for that book, their own languages, and that is something that you're able to use in those genres um, to great effect. It's really effective and um, it's a lot of fun. For those of us who write um, stories set in the real world, it's just as important to create the color of language by using slang and other interesting phrases of speech that exist in different geographical areas and cultures, and even within families. You can create a language culture for your characters even in the real world. This is an inspiration board that I have on my Pinterest board for when I was writing a book with Southern characters. It helped me a lot too. Even if I didn't use these exact phrases, it helped me to really get my mindset into that um, language culture. So, what other factors affect speech? The character's education, their religion and morality, their status. So, are they upper class? Are they lower class? That type of thing. Their secrets and motives. So, what are they going to try to keep from someone else? Or when they enter a conversation, what are they trying to make happen? Their intelligence, their past experiences, the setting, the occupation, their motives, and their relationship to others, especially to the relationship to others who are actually in that particular conversation. I have this picture of an operating room on this slide because of an experience that I had when I was having a C-section for my um, last baby. I was laying there on the operating room table, and the baby had been born and taken away to the nursery with the nurse and her dad. And at this point in the operation, they will put you to sleep so that you can rest while they put you back together again. And it's one of the more arduous parts of the surgery. Unfortunately, I did not go completely to sleep, though my eyes were closed. And it was funny how as soon as they thought I was asleep, their tone changed. Excuse me again, I have a cold. Starting. But they began to talk and joke in a much different way than the professional tone they'd been using before. In fact, my doctor turned to, or I didn't see him turn, but he talked to my gynecologist, to my anesthesiologist, and said, "Hey Frank, what do you say we just leave her here on the table and go play a round of golf?" And I said, "I would prefer you didn't." And the whole room kind of gasped. And my doctor said, "Frank, she's supposed to be asleep. You're not doing your job." And it was just really funny to me how the way they talked and interacted with each other changed depending on who they thought was listening in on them. It was a really good lesson for me for writing dialogue for my characters. Okay, so now we get to figure out how we're actually going to do this thing, how we're going to write this dialogue. First, as a practice technique, or if you are just trying to figure out a scene or a chapter, write some free-flowing dialogue for just one character at a time, possibly like an interview, or with a question to get them talking. Write all the dialogue in a scene with no tags or action beats to try and get an idea of the sound of it. Remember, when we're talking to people in real life, it's not punctuated by he said, she said, and action tags. And so sometimes if we're having a hard time figuring things out, just hearing it as if it was a real conversation can really be helpful. You can also color code the dialogue to make sure that all of the characters are there, that a character doesn't drop out of the conversation unnaturally. So for instance, if you give a color an orange highlight every time they speak, if you start to notice that the orange highlighter is not showing up through the majority of the conversation, you might want to take that into consideration and figure out if they need to have more lines, or maybe if they don't belong in that conversation at all. Try to have the conversation out loud before writing it. Sometimes a white screen can be intimidating. And so just talking it through like you were just having the conversation with someone at your kitchen table can help you to overcome that hurdle. Make notes on what the characters should be talking about and what the dialogue should accomplish. Basically, this is writing an outline for your conversation. Keep your dialogue tight and focused. Some characters are blabberboxes and others have ADD. I say that as a mother with 3 children who have been diagnosed with ADD. If it fits their personality and you want to let them talk on or go off on a tangent and change the topic, then you can certainly do that. But understand that has a big effect on the reader's ability to follow the story and their ability to move quickly through it. I would use it only occasionally for effect. The majority of the time, you do need to keep that dialogue really edited down to the essentials. And this is similar to the point before. Allow your characters to have some freedom, but remember that you are in control. Be strict with those type A personalities. You can allow a conversation to lead the story in a different direction. There's a lot of beauty in that, and a lot of really exciting things happen sometimes. But remember, you do need to focus the characters sometimes on accomplishing a certain task when they're speaking. And sometimes you just have to be in charge. Be the captain of your ship. Avoid on-the-nose dialogue. Find ways to be subtle, to say the same thing in fewer words and not give everything straight to the reader. It allows them to feel like it's more realistic, but it invites them to try to figure out this mystery. What is this character really saying? What secrets are they hiding? And that's really exciting for a reader. Also think about, is this the right character for the job? Think about what you're trying to accomplish with a certain conversation. And sometimes you may be having a character talking to the wrong person. Someone else might be able to fulfill the other side of the conversation better. If you're going to break a rule, break it for one character. If it's adjectives, elevated language, lumbering dialogue, filler words, you can use these things, but use them for one character and with a purpose. Don't waste your zingers on minor characters. Make one character really good at them. And the reason for this is that people love really funny, really witty people. And so they tend to really, really like them. And that's fine. It's exactly what you want to happen. But you don't want your readers to like your minor characters more than your main characters. And you also don't want your minor characters taking over the story. So, now that we have started practicing dialogue and trying to implement all the different things that we're learning, we get into editing, which is where the magic happens. Here are some of my quick tricks. Have someone else read your dialogue. You should read your dialogue out loud, but it takes on a whole new level of craziness when someone else is reading it. You see where they stumble, you see where they put inflections, all of these things that you are automatically putting in the way you want it. It's helpful to see what someone else does with the same words. I specifically have my husband read my dialogue in his "this is so cheesy" voice. I figure if it can sound halfway decent that way, then maybe it's not so bad. Listen to it without dialogue text and see if you can follow who is saying what. This goes back to having multiple personalities among all your characters. Can you tell just by what they're saying who that character is? This is the title of this class, Who Said That? A real sign that you are nailing a character's dialogue is the ability to say, this is what this person would say. So this is an obsolete line. Obviously, Twitter's changed their 140 characters since the last time I gave this class. It's still applicable though, just not to such a degree. I used to be involved in tweeting for different things like One Line Wednesday and different hashtags like that, where people would get together with a theme and they would submit part of their writing. And I found in doing that when I had to fit it down into a small number of characters, that I really, really cleaned it up, that I cut out a lot of unnecessary things, that I found stronger ways to say things, and the whole thing became more dynamic and impactful. So even though Twitter is not going to work exactly the same way anymore, you can still use this exercise. Come back to it later, and if you can't figure out in the moment, then come back and think about it just like you would in real life. Sometimes our brains need a while to really mull over things and figure them out. If somebody says something awesome in real life, write it down. Remember, this isn't a conversation, this isn't real life, this is dialogue. As you've heard me talking to this class, sometimes I say sometimes I say the wrong thing, I stumble over my words, I can even ramble. And this is something that we don't want to happen in dialogue. We don't want it to be like real life. We want it to mimic real life, and we want it to do a better job. Like I talked about with some of my One Line Wednesday tweaks, these are a few examples that I'll share. And these are things that I edited down really tight until they became some writing or dialogue that I consider to be really effective. Yeah, well, love makes us all act like idiots sometimes. Oh, is that your excuse? Hey man, Jake said, his voice calm. I was just getting to know your girlfriend. So I saw, Nick said. Is she pretty? Very. You can't fall for a Mormon girl. She'll try to convert you. He smiled. Might be worth it. Here is a line from my Christmas story, Sawdust and Mistletoe. And I'll love bugging the daylights out of her when we dump this junk in her immaculately clean workroom. This example is really clunky, has too many words in it, and does not flow very well. So I needed to figure out how I could say the same thing in a more streamlined way. And I'll love dumping this junk in her spotless workroom. As you see, I cut out a lot of words. I changed some words, especially taking out the long adjective immaculately clean, because spotless means the same thing. And I have a much more dynamic and impactful line of dialogue. Here is another line from my book, The Trouble with Billionaires. You know, I'm pretty sure I should wait until I have a lawyer present before I say anything to incriminate myself, he said, eyeing her cautiously. So there's quite a bit wrong with this. Let's just go ahead and show you what I did to change it. I should probably wait till I have a lawyer present. I don't want to incriminate myself. Once again, I cut it down. I also separated it into two sentences. This is a man, and he's a businessman. And so I needed to make his sentences more concise. I also cut off the dialogue tag, and I cut off the description of how he said that, because it's pretty well implied within the words themselves, and the words show his personality enough that since it's a conversation between two people, I didn't necessarily need to point out in this instance who was saying it. This is from a read and see novel that I am currently still writing and editing, and this is something that my critique group pointed out to me because I had changed a character's personality in the middle of this conversation. Alex raised his eyebrows. It is not her lips I'm concerned with at the moment. Ah, yes, her heart is a different matter. Would you take advice from an old but wise woman? Well, the interesting thing is this old and wise woman would never ask meekly if you would take her advice. She would just give it to you, and she would give you the advice in a startling and irreverent way. So this is what I changed it to. And in this case, it's not getting shorter, it's getting longer, but it's doing the job of telling this character's words better. Alex raised his eyebrows. It is not her lips I'm concerned with at the moment. Of course not, but if her heart is the prize, you'd best change your tactics. You are fighting the battle without your best weapons. Her eyes swept over him boldly. And, dear sir, I suspect your arsenal would be impressive. This is also from my Southern Billionaire book, The Trouble with Billionaires. So we have a Southern character here. Do I look terrible? Like you got dragged through a bush? This is sufficient, but I wanted to see if I could add more personality. Do I look terrible? Like a drunk on Sunday dragged backwards through a bush. So again, this is longer, it's wordier, but it's doing the specific job of showing her personality and her language culture. From the same book, I did a lot of time editing the dialogue from this book. Well, regardless, you can tell people that the rumors aren't true. We aren't going to date anymore. Why not? So this conversation is happening between a woman who is from the South, and it's also a point of the conversation that is full of conflict and tension. Well, regardless, you can tell people the rumors aren't true. We aren't going to date anymore. Why not, honey? There ain't a thing wrong with that man his money won't make up for. So by changing this woman's dialogue into something that shows humor and shows so much of her personality, we are able to really break up some of the tension of the moment, which I felt needed to happen there. And it also makes the southern character who's being really noisy more likable. I didn't want the audience to not like that she was being so nosy. And so I made her I made her sympathetic by making her funny. In my experience, it's a lack of money that complicates things. My life would be about perfect if there's more lettuce in the salad bowl, if you know what I mean. I do. I'd love more money, but I won't trade it for happiness. Nope, never again. So this example is actually because I want to show you how characters can keep their secrets or keep their thoughts to themselves and still share it with the readers. Um, this conversation is happening in a beauty salon, and the character with the second line of dialogue does not necessarily want to tell this person all of her personal business, and so I changed it to this. In my experience, it's a lack of money that complicates things. My life would be about perfect if there was more lettuce in the salad bowl, if you know what I mean. I do. Charlotte would love to have more money, but she wouldn't trade her happiness for it. Nope, never again. Are you wanting layers? Who doesn't want layers? By the simple fact that she was avoiding answering this conversation with her full, um, with the conversation she was having going on inside her head, we're able to show the reader what she's thinking, what she's feeling, but she is not revealing her personal feelings and thoughts to this other character. I appreciate the time that you spent with this class today. I hope some of it has been helpful for you. If you would like to continue to learn more, you can visit the YouTube page for the Writing Girls, Writing Gals. I am part of this group, and we are four sweet romance authors staying up late talking about writing. We hope you'll subscribe to our channel and join us there. Here are some of my books if you'd like to check them out and be able to read more of the dialogue from these examples that I have been presenting to you today. And for those of you who enjoy Regency, some of these examples were from my Regency novel, and you can get an example of some of my other writing in this genre at regencyhouseparty.com. 5 authors, 5 romances, 1 unforgettable party. Again, thank you for joining my class, and I hope that you have had a wonderful time with this incredible conference. Thanks so much.